Welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist on Facebook Live, where we answer common questions about atheism and state-church separation. I'm Andrew Seidel, the Director of Strategic Response here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces this weekly show.
And I'm Amit Pal, Director of Communications at FFRF, which works to keep religion and government separate and to educate the people about the views of non-theists.
Today, we're going to chat about our country's public education system and how Trump and his administration, led by Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, is out to undermine it and demolish the constitutional wall of separation. If you have a question during today's show, you can ask it right here on Facebook or send an email to askanatheist@ffrf.org. That's askanatheist@ffrf.org.
So let's talk about DeVos, Andrew, and the proposals she unveiled this week. This affects all of us as parents, as educators, and as taxpayers. I can cop to sort of filling two roles because I am a taxpayer and I'm a parent of two girls in the public education system. So Andrew, can we please talk about what Betsy DeVos and the Trump administration have been up to this week?
Sure, and I think too we can say it's even broader than that. You know, even if you're not a taxpayer or a parent, public education, it goes to the heart of our democracy, right?
Certainly.
You know, if you're not an informed, educated system, it's very hard, it's hard to take part in our system.
Sure.
But the education budget that was proposed it's alarming in a number of respects. It slashes a lot of after-school programs, especially for inter-school kids. It does a lot to the student loan program, favoring these companies that rack up student loan debt and not favoring the students. And it establishes this $5 billion program for what we call neo-vouchers, which is essentially a way to funnel public money into private Christian schools. That's really what the end goal is.
So Andrew, what's really fascinating is that DeVos has been at the center of a net of fundamentalist organizations pretty much all her life. It goes back to her father. Her brother, Eric Prince, is maybe the top mercenary in this country and a fundamentalist. Yeah. And she's married into the Amway family, another fundamentalist organization, and they have funded voucher schemes and programs and charter schools in Michigan since forever, given literally millions to fundamentalist groups. There's a fascinating piece in Mother Jones which focuses on a background I'd recommend to everybody. So she comes from that background. As we were chatting about just a few minutes ago, she has had no kids ever in the public school system. She's never been a public official. So the whole notion of public is anathema to her. And this is just an extension of that. Could you talk about what she's injecting into the public school system to make it less public?
Absolutely, and I think we can even say it's broader than that. It's not just about the push to privatize the public school system, as you mentioned. I actually think, and there's good evidence to suggest that the school choice movement and this voucher movement is really more about destroying our public schools. There's a guy named Kyle Olson, actually in Michigan. He started School Choice Week. This is this National School Choice Week. It happens every year. I think it was last month. And he started this push for school choice because he wanted to, and he was pretty clear about this, destroy the public school system. He said that Jesus would go into the temple of public education and try to destroy it the same way he did when he was overturning the money changers in the temple.
Wow.
This is not a push to give students choice. It's a push to undermine public education because an educated public tends to be less religious. That is really at its heart what we are seeing here. And that's why FFRF tends to care so much about this issue. And if we look at the schools that are receiving these neo-vouchers, 100% of the schools in Wisconsin are religious.
That struck me so deeply after joining FFRF. I sort of knew that a lot of these recipient and beneficiaries of voucher schemes are religious schools, but not to that extent. 100% in Wisconsin and almost 100% in a number of other states.
99% in Indiana.
Yes.
I mean, in Wisconsin, and it's not just religious, right? It's Christian.
Yes,
when we're saying religious, I mean, in Wisconsin, 160 of the 163 schools that were receiving this were Christian schools. And it's very problematic because voucher schools, these schools that aren't public, are not governed by strict laws, often not governed by any laws. They don't have to follow the First Amendment.
Yeah.
They don't have to follow non-discrimination law.
Yeah.
They don't have to follow the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah.
They can discriminate against
Yeah.
kids who have learning disabilities,
Yeah.
or kids who are a different religion, or kids who are LGBTQ.
Yeah.
And we're putting public money into organizations that can do that. So it's a big problem. And the way the program is structured is itself also problematic. So this $5 billion scheme that they've set up, what it actually is going to do is going to be a tax credit. So if you, the taxpayer, want to knock $1,000 off the amount of taxes you owe, you can donate $1,000 to what's called
Wow.
a scholarship granting organization.
Yeah.
And you get a $1-for-$1 match,
Wow.
knocking your tax liability down
Yeah.
by giving it to this organization. So you're not giving it even directly to the schools. What they're doing in this program is they're inserting one of the organizations, kind of like Betsy DeVos and her family and her network that you were talking about, run in between the taxpayer and the religious school.
Yeah.
So that's the way they're trying to get around the separation of state and church. And they're adding this whole, it's basically a shell game. That's what it is.
And of course, Andrew, she unveiled another proposal this week too. Could we talk about that? Apart from the tax neo-voucher scheme in the budget, there was something else that she was in the headlines
I could
for.
go on about the
Yeah.
neo-voucher
Yeah.
scheme for, what do we have, 2 hours?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's one of the most problematic things, again, because the goal is to just torpedo public education.
Sure.
And the fraud that we're seeing is rampant.
Yes,
we
should touch on that too. Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. It's especially here in the Milwaukee schools.
Yeah.
We're seeing schools that take millions of dollars in voucher money.
Yes.
And they disappear in the middle of the night.
Yes.
There's literally stories in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel of kids showing up to school with the gates chained in the middle of December, and they have to all of a sudden scramble to find a new school.
Yes, and even the ones that are functioning are so decrepit and so badly run. The Progressive Magazine, where I used to be, had a piece where the editor went to Milwaukee and actually toured these schools and just came back with a horrifying report. So it's
terrible.
absolutely dismal.
And it's because there's no accountability or rules in place governing them. We're giving them public money and they can do whatever they want.
Sure.
And we're seeing, gross violations too. There was one example in Milwaukee where a convicted rapist was running this school. He held a knife to his victim's throat
Wow.
and was running this school for kids.
Yeah.
They were serving the kids ramen with a cup of water for lunch. They were cutting the whole milk. They had all these school lunch violations. The kids were standing out back next to dumpsters with old mattresses waiting for the buses to come pick them up. And then the school took millions of dollars and disappeared.
Yeah.
And we've even seen it in cases where they do that and then they go to Florida and start opening up other schools.
Yes.
And Florida has a similar system.
Yeah.
So.
And interestingly, DeVos's proposal has, or the voucher scheme proposal has received pushback on Capitol Hill, even from conservatives, because it's such a federal overreach, and of course, obviously for a wrong purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's a good point. It's not a small government bill, really.
Yes. And could we talk a bit about the other proposal that Betsy DeVos unveiled this week?
Yeah, which one? Sorry.
Oh, okay.
There's so much going on. There's the Equality Act.
So she basically said that the rule forbidding funneling of taxpayer money to religious organizations via private schools is now defunct because of Trinity.
Yeah, and that's wrong on the law.
Yeah.
I mean, this will be an oversimplification, but essentially, the way courts have decided that vouchers are acceptable is they're saying that the parent's private choice of where their child is going to school cuts off the government funding violation.
Sure.
So if you don't have the government directly handing the money to these religious schools, then it's in the court's eyes not a violation. That's why you have this sort of shell game that they've set up where instead of giving it directly to the schools, they're giving it to this scholarship granting organization and then taking a dollar for dollar match on their tax liability, knocking their tax bill down. The idea that Trinity Lutheran somehow changes any of this is just fundamentally wrong. So Trinity Lutheran is a case where the Supreme Court decided, well, let's back up. A church wanted to get access to public funds to repave their playground.
Sure.
They wanted to rubberize the surface so kids didn't get skinned knees. And the state of Missouri said, you're a church, so you can't access those funds. We aren't allowed to give money directly to a church. The Supreme Court weighed in on the case, and in a very odd decision, and they, in their own mind, they said a very limited decision. They specifically limit it to this particular instance.
But that's not what's
of playground
yeah,
getting
exactly.
skin
Yeah,
knees.
yeah,
Yeah. So the idea that it is expansive and somehow changes things is fundamentally wrong.
Sure.
She's absolutely wrong on the law on that. Not surprising. And the overall problem is still there with the goal of this is to fund religious education and destroy the public schools.
And not to get too deep into the weeds, but she's also said that she's all in favor of doing away with the so-called Blaine amendments at the state level. Could you just talk just a bit about that and educate our audience?
Sure. So Blaine amendments, and Blaine amendments is an incorrect moniker for these, really. Blaine amendments are what we would prefer to call no-aid clauses. And these are clauses in the state constitution that say the government cannot give money to churches. This is the clause that FFRF litigated in our Morris County case, which says you can't give money to churches for their repair. It also includes religious education and things like that. Because it affects voucher programs and because it says on the state level that you can't give money to religious schools, conservative Christians are fundamentally against these no-aid clauses. So there are provisions in the state constitution that are more explicit about keeping state and church separate, essentially. And actually, Colorado has one, and I went out there a couple months ago. Well, I guess it was a year ago now to testify about the utility of this, and it was a school choice outfit that was pushing to overturn the Blaine Amendment there as well.
Well, great, Andrew. And, we seem to have a good number of questions.
Oh, good. Let's do it.
People are interested in this sort of thing. Let's see. So, Alisa Tapia says, tapping into, if I maybe excuse the bad pun, current event, something that's been in the headlines the last day or two, with all the news about college admissions fraud because of the Felicity Huffman and the celebrity scandal. I was wondering if pushing vouchers is also considered fraud. Good question.
I think that is a good question, and I think it is. And it's not just that it's fraudulent on the American taxpayer, really.
Sure.
But it also, it does create these situations where it is ripe for fraud because there is no oversight, first of all, on the schools. And then second of all, in the program that DeVos and Trump want to set up, there's very little oversight on these scholarship granting organizations. And there are some laws in place, but they're ripe for abuse. And essentially, we talked about this shell game. What they've done is they've just literally taken and created a bureaucracy to put it in the middle to avoid the state church violation. And that in itself is, it's kind of ridiculous, especially for the small government folks who malign bureaucracy at every chance they get.
I love the way that question tapped into. Yes, that's something that's so current. Maurice Roy asks, very good question again. Don't voucher schools hurt special needs students? I remember reading that voucher schools don't have to accommodate those students, even though they're receiving taxpayer funds. Is that correct?
It is absolutely correct, and this is a big problem.
Exactly.
Voucher schools do not have to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. They don't have to comply with the 14th Amendment. They don't have to comply with the First Amendment. They don't have to comply with any Title VII. All of these rules that protect vulnerable populations from discrimination do not apply to religious schools. So they can discriminate against kids with learning disabilities, kids with physical disabilities, LGBTQ kids, presumably even on race, but they can exclude Jewish kids from their schools if they want. And the fact that public money, whatever shell it's going through, is getting to those schools and funding that discrimination should make every taxpayer stand up and say absolutely not.
So we're getting a lot of good questions. I love the third one too. Louise Patrick asks, do these voucher programs actually help low-income households? And do the students get better grades on average?
Oh, fantastic question.
No, great question.
I feel like that was teed up for me. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Louis. So the answer to those questions. First, voucher programs help kids that are already in private school. The number changes depending on the state, but about 3/4 of kids in vouchers or in private religious schools are the ones taking advantage of the vouchers. So this is not all of a sudden allowing all these low-income kids to go to these great private schools. It's benefiting the kids who are already going to the private schools. That's a very important point. Second point is, no, it does not help on education at all.
Contrary to the claims they keep on making again and again. And they try to pass this off as something that will help kids trapped in bad schools.
But and every study that's been done, to my knowledge, literally every single study that's been done, shows that voucher students either perform the same as in public schools or worse. So they absolutely do not improve. There is no evidence to suggest that voucher schools improve academic performance.
We are on a roll. Chandler Phillip asks, why do Christian groups need taxpayer funds to pay for secular tutoring in the first place? Don't they have enough money already, since they don't pay taxes themselves?
You would think so. This reminds me that there's this great Ben Franklin quote. I don't think we have it. We used it last week on the Morris County case. I don't think, Bruce, you probably don't have it in the system still. But Ben Franklin basically said that when religion is good, it does good, I conceive that it will support itself. And when it does bad, I conceive that the government should not. I'm completely butchering it. The point being, if you want government support as a religion, you're probably a bad religion. And that's what we're seeing here, I think. There is no reason for us to put this money into these religious schools that, one, are not going to do as good a job of preparing students, two, are going to be able to discriminate, and three, let's just put the money into the public school system where we can teach everybody equally. And I mean, so to me, it's a big problem. Understatement of the episode, I think. It's a big problem.
Our viewers are on a roll today, and really they're topping themselves. The next question echoes a comment I saw in the post on the proposal. Ruth Lucas asks, does this mean that Betsy DeVos actually supports private Muslim schools? That's a great one.
It is, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where almost all the schools that get vouchers are religious, and almost all the religious voucher schools are Christian. So when we're talking about these, it's a wink and a nod kind of thing. They know that they're supporting private Christian schools, and they know that that's where.
And I wonder, do we know of any? There must be at least a handful. There
have been. There was a couple in Minnesota. I believe there was one in Michigan, and some of them have had just the same kind of problems that we see in the other schools.
Yes. So the final question, and as I said, these have been great questions today. Audrey Hausman asks, are there any? Again, a great question. Any private voucher colleges and universities, or is this just a grade school thing, from elementary to high school?
And I believe, I would have to double check, but I believe this particular budget plan is talking K through 12 and some pre-K, not talking about. I mean, there are serious problems as we're seeing in the news with public education at the higher level and the privatization of that, but particularly this budget and the tax scheme that they've come up with here is for K through 12.
So Andrew, that's been a great discussion, and there's Don Addis was a cartoonist for the St. Petersburg Times. We're coming out with a book, a collection of his cartoons, and this cartoon that he has, that we are seeing right now, encapsulates our discussion wonderfully and wryly. And it says, what, as of course we all can see, what does church-state separation mean? And the girl is answering, it's when the church separates the state from its school money. So now we're going to another cartoonist. Our co-president, FFRF co-president Dan Barker, is on the road so much. He recently returned from Alaska, and believe it or not, is headed to Poland in a few weeks. He's on the road so much that we've introduced a game modeled on a popular children's show. So the game we have is, where in the world is Dan Barker? So where is Dan currently, and who is he with? Hello, Dan.
Hello, Amit. Hello, Andrew.
Hello.
I'm in Arizona. How does this look? Does it look all right?
Yeah,
I'm in Arizona right now, and right now in Mesa.
Wow.
Having breakfast with Steve Benson.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Benson,
How are you? Yes.
How are you?
Yes. Today is.
It's good to see Andrew and Amit.
Yeah, Amit. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you guys are the double A, the Action Alert.
AA.
The AA.
Yeah,
Is that where
absolutely.
you're going to AA after that?
That too, it's exactly.
It doesn't work, it turns out.
So we're taking advantage of a easy morning, and I'm taking Steve to brunch because he's so poor, you know, and bankrupt and down on his luck, you know. So I'm buying him a cheap breakfast.
This is what happens to atheists. We're all on our own.
Yeah. And so we are. I'm going to speak tonight at Arizona State University in Tempe. That's what it is, ASU.
Tempe, you got to say it right.
Tempe, Arizona.
Tempe, right.
And then tomorrow night in Mesa for the Humanist Freethinkers, a group of people that might want to start a chapter of FFRF in Mesa, and they're going to have a piano there. So I'm going to be doing some. You should come, Steve, and draw some cartoons.
That'd be fun. I mean, they probably shut us down, just the cartoon part, but yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
So Andrew and Amit.
He's so cute. Little baby.
Did you see the cartoon that went out with yesterday's Action Alert about the wedding age?
I
Steve
did.
drew?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So Steve's been drawing cartoons for us recently, and here's an example. And he has a lovely hand. I always envy those people who have sketching and drawing skills, since I don't have any myself. So you can see an example.
Well,
of Steve's work.
if you've got a big pen and a bendable light, I mean, you're in like Flint. It's a lot of fun.
So that was, I think that's New Hampshire is voting or suggesting raising the marriage age to 18
Yes.
from 16.
Yes.
Was the Action Alert.
That's correct.
Yes,
That's
correct.
progress, isn't it? I originally wanted to draw a toddler, but but we didn't want to go there. So
Well, and there's actually a story behind why that's happening too. There was a young Girl Scout who was pushing for raising that age, and she got it successfully raised to where it is now, which I think is 16. And that wasn't where she wanted it. So she ran for office,
Wow.
won at
Wow, that's
18, and
incredible.
is now pushing to get the age pushed up even higher. Really, just a really impressive young
No,
woman.
I've learned so much, Andrew, after joining FFRF. I did not know that thousands, if not tens of thousands, of young, boys and girls are married every year in this country. That was news to me. I thought, at most it'd be like a tiny, tiny number, but it's much bigger than people think it to be.
It's pretty huge, and it's almost always the exemptions in the law are almost always targeted at favoring religion.
Yeah, exactly. It's religion-based, yes.
Yeah.
So can you guys ask Bruce if he's got any more cartoons up by Steve there that we can see?
Yeah, we're gonna throw a
None
bunch.
that you will
absolutely.
admit.
We're gonna cycle through a bunch of them.
Yes, exactly. Steve
Right
has
now.
lots of stuff that we can display. Lovely.
What is that one?
So this is the angel wings.
Oh yeah. Brief us on that, Dan.
Well, the Pope said something about children and angels, and yet if that's not an angel that you drew. What is that shadow?
A vulture, a bird of prey. Carry on with the carry on. If you know
Carry
what I
on,
mean.
yeah, going after children. So,
Right.
what does it say? Courtesy. Oh, it's a Southern Baptist. I'm sorry. This is the Southern Baptist Church,
Right.
who's supposed to be protecting the children, and we know about that big scandal.
Yeah,
Yes.
hundreds of cases of pedophilia, and nothing has been done.
Yeah.
So that's holding the church accountable by the authority of the state. I mean, it's so Jeffersonian. What's wrong with us?
And what is that picture, Steve? That's the Pope said that these molesters, these priests who are molesting children, are tools of Satan. And so you drew this. What is that?
Well, it was a wrenching experience to draw this, but yeah, I drew a big lug of a wrench there, and the little kid, these innocent little children are caught in the vice, and here you have these cardinals. I mean, was it Pell? I guess it was
Cardinal
just-
Pell from
Cardinal
Australia.
Australia.
Just
He just got
sentenced.
sentenced to 6 years today, I believe,
That's correct.
in prison. So hiding behind the cloaks of God.
But the sad thing about it is the church wants to take responsibility, but the Pope is not blaming the church or the priest. He's saying it's Satan that's doing this work. So, it's not our fault.
It's not the fault of the employees of the church that they do dances with Satan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this cartoon, we've been talking, especially with Andrew and the legal staff, about how the religious right is trying to weaponize religion. They're trying to use religion as a way to
stop the presses. This has never happened before.
Yeah, weaponizing religious freedom, trying to turn it into that license to discriminate and violate the rights of other citizens.
And
so there's some semi-naked guy hanging on this T-shaped structure with two pistols in his hand, weaponizing religion. That was cute.
When I was drawing that, I was wondering, how is he able to balance himself up on the cross with the back of his hands glued to the cross and holding pistols at the same time? But he's Jesus. He can do anything.
Yeah, that's right. And then this one was just last week you did that one for us.
Right. Yeah.
What's it about? Oh, Beware of Dogma, a general cartoon about God is giving commands. And what does the woman say?
I think it's, I really get enthusiastic when we see the traditional roles of women being broken as they speak out, for themselves, for their independence, and basically push back against male domination. I think it's terrific. I mean, God has met his match. That's assuming he's a he, but who knows?
Well, I think a living, breathing woman is more powerful than a fictional character. I don't know about you.
Amen.
The God is dead thing, yeah.
Oh, so then there's the push by the Project Blitz.
Yeah.
You guys have talked about this before. Project Blitz is trying to get In God We Trust in the public classrooms in many different states, and they've introduced laws about that. So you drew a cartoon with a substitute teacher.
Yeah. Right, and she's going to be the substitute for today. At least reason is, I'm just amazed at how, even though we have codified law, there's a relentless attack on the part of religious organizations to creep in and to basically commandeer the public square in the name of their particular God of choice. I don't think this is ever going to go away without, regardless of whatever laws are put in place, because in the end, all secular law is subject to the law of my God.
They keep us busy, Steve. That's what we do. I mean, exactly. I mean, much of what we do, if not most, is basically targeting schools, and trying to counter them.
And the interesting thing, of course, about you get all of these self-righteous religious believers inveighing against pornography. I mean, if you want to see probably the ultimate pornographic novel, work of fiction, if you will, on book stands today, it's the Bible.
So you drew that cartoon about parental discretion on the Bible. Mm-hmm. I think for two reasons. Because Project Blitz is trying to get Bible classes in public schools in many states.
Right.
But also, last week, President Trump visited the victims of the hurricane in Alabama.
Yes. Oh, yes,
and instead of throwing paper towels at them, what did he do?
Well, he autographed Bibles. This is the same president who, when he was asked by a religious broadcasting organization, was it CBN? I don't know, a Christian broadcast, if he needs forgiveness, and he says, "No, I don't have to be forgiven for anything. I drink my little wine, I eat my little wafer, and no, I don't have to be forgiven for anything."
So when he signed the Bible, usually it's the author who signs a book, right? Yes. So is Trump the author of? He doesn't need forgiveness, does he?
No, actually, if I may interject here, the postscript, this whole episode reflects much more badly on his base than him, because it was their idea to come up to him with the Bibles. I mean, for once, he didn't instigate it. Well, of course, he reveled in it and he loved it. But it's a cult, and they believe him to be a messenger of God or whatever.
Well, I think he thinks of himself as God.
Absolutely, and this reinforced that.
Well, the thing that is so ironic and perverse about all of this, in my opinion, is that evangelicals in particular, who invoke the name of God to peddle their idea of purity and righteousness, are willing to look the other way when it comes to endorsing a serial wife cheat and admitted narcissist who says he's in no need of forgiveness. And these are the same people who claim to be the moral leaders who have basically joined themselves at the hypocritical hip.
That's a good line.
One of the most immoral presidents we have ever had.
Hey, that's a cartoon. put them together by the hip. Hypocritical hip.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty hip, and we're in the job of doing the Hippocratic Oath, trying to do what's best for the well-being of America.
2 peas in a pod over there.
Do we have any other cartoons to show of Steve's? Yeah, okay.
Well, you'll have to wait. He's drawing a lot more. You do know the news that Steve held out longer than most editorial cartoonists in the country. It started with thousands, went down to 300 or so, went down to about 30. And then in January, Steve was laid off by the Arizona Republic.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean he's not being busy. Look at all the work he's been doing since then.
All the wonderful work for us also, absolutely.
Those cartoons you just saw were done since that time.
Yes, absolutely, Dan. So, well, no, it's great. It's great work. Steve,
thank you so
busy.
Much. Yes. It's keeping me off the streets, which I think most people would appreciate.
And then, Dan, of course, you're there. We shouldn't forget to give a talk and talk about your new book. So here it is.
Yes.
Mere Morality. And this is Dan Barker's new book. Which book is this? Number
10 of 10. Free Thought books.
Wow.
So that's tomorrow night.
That's tomorrow night.
Go to our website and look under events and appearances, and you can see if you live in Arizona, you're welcome to come out there tonight at Tempe and tomorrow night in Mesa.
And if you don't
at Arizona State University.
And if you don't live in Arizona or a nearby state, the book is available via our website at ffrf.org.
You know, and they're in Arizona, and it reminded me of a story to cap off the voucher talk that we should tell in a minute here.
Yes, we can segue back to that.
Yeah. But Dan and are we gonna say goodbye, or are you guys gonna hang out with us?
Yeah.
Dan and Steve,
you asked
all the
us
best.
so eagerly. Okay, goodbye.
Well, thank you for joining us. Enjoy your breakfast.
Enjoy your breakfast and enjoy the warm weather. It's still Dan is still cold here, although not as horrible as it was a few days ago. But I'm sure it's definitely warmer in Arizona than it's here. So enjoy that.
It's down into the 50s now.
Oh, okay.
It's cold chilling.
Oh, okay.
Get out. It's like we're going to have the Iditarod race later this afternoon.
Oh, well. See you both and take care. Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. And going back to Arizona.
Well, it reminded me that Arizona had an interesting problem with vouchers, and they've been sort of a hotbed for vouchers.
Okay.
But there's a scholarship granting organization in Arizona. So this is the organization that taxpayers can give their money to and then take that dollar for dollar matching. And under the state law, that organization was allowed to use 10% of its money for overhead, for bureaucracy. One of the biggest voucher schemes, one of the biggest scholarship granting organizations in Arizona was run by a guy named Yarborough.
Oh, yes.
Who happened to be a politician. He was in the Arizona State House and then in the Arizona State Senate. He actually was president of the State Senate for a while. And he ran this scholarship granting organization, took a 6-figure salary off the organization. The organization itself rented space. Its landlord was Mr. Yarborough, who collected rent from it. Yeah. And then they also the scholarship organization farmed out a lot of their data management, information system, all that kind of stuff to another group. I think it was called DY Systems. The Y in DY Systems stood for Yarborough, who also owned the other company. Wow. So he was raking in all of this money off of this public voucher scheme. And he was one of the guys who ended up proposing it in the first place. Very much like the DeVos.
Well, great note to end the show on, Andrew, tying in
fraud,
Arizona, and the voucher scheme. Yeah, and so it's been great having you on and discussing the voucher scheme, and great having Dan and Steve on in Arizona. And that's our show for today about vouchers, the public school system, Arizona, and all of that together. Thank you for watching. We invite you to become a member of FFRF to help us in our vital work to keep state and church separate and to educate the public about the views of non-theists. Please visit our webpage at ffrf.org or phone 1-800-335-4021. Again, 800-335-4021. And one way you can help FFRF is by contacting government officials who violate the law. And if you want to receive FFRF action alerts on your smartphone, text FFRF, that's of course our acronym, to 52886. Data rates may apply. Again, that's FFRF to 52886.
And we'll see you next week for another episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist.